So as you all know, we have been running our Strike webinar series created by Ms. Bryan, our program assistant for the Candidate Empowerment Center, as a way to continue to have alumni engagement during our unprecedented time of dealing with the global pandemic. And so in particular, we have had various sessions about classroom management, about what you can do in education outside of being in the classroom. And to that end, today's session is similar to that kind of line of thought. And we have Melvin Middleton Jr. His bio was on the flyer that you received. And today he's going to be talking about beyond the schoolhouse, a discussion of careers in education outside of the classroom. He is a graduate of Florida A&M University's College of Education in elementary education. He graduated in my era, the 90s, the best era, right?
That's right.
And so the Humphreys babies, right? So we are happy to have him here today. So Mr. Middleton, you can go on and get started. And if you want to share your screen, you can go on and do that.
Okay, thank you. And please, if this is some information that has been shared, I don't want to be redundant, so please interrupt me and say, hey, go on to the next thing if it's something that has been discussed at length already. But thank you, and I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, are you seeing my screen at this point? Okay, all right, good. Well, again, thank you for allowing me to come and speak to the FAMU. Spell check likes to check me on that all the time, but FAMULY is a word. We just need to add it to the dictionary. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit, and it's kind of based on my own personal story as my evolution as an educator with going into my third decade in education. And so wanted to share some information with the up-and-comers as they make their decisions in terms of what directions that they want to move in terms of what happens after graduation. But first, I do have a disclaimer, and that is I am not recruiting for my current institution, Valencia. I'm not recruiting for anyone. I just wanted to share this information. And of course, first and foremost, or more importantly, I am not discouraging any of you students from going into the classroom. Rather, the thought process is to have options, and then as an educator, and particularly as an educator starting out, it's also good to have some other streams of income, specifically because you're not going to get rich in those first couple of years as a teacher. So it's a great it's great to have other options within the field of education in terms of things that you can do. And so just kind of wanted to put that out there. And so in terms of the agenda, already discussed this disclaimer, obviously, and then I will talk a little bit about my personal story and some discussion about the educational job market, and then some of the data about education, and specifically as it relates to some of our students who are coming out of HBCUs, who are typically individuals, African-American and people of color, and then some final thoughts, and then some recommendations as I close out. And so first, my story. This is me and my family when I graduated from FAMU in December of 1997, the last class to wear black robes. After that, it was the Time Magazine Princeton Review College of the year that I finished. And then we started with the green robes after that. So have a distinction of being the last class to graduate in the black robes. And I'm very proud to say that between the three little girls that are in the picture, two of them are graduates of FAMU, recent graduates. Unfortunately, neither in the College of Education, but two within the past 2 years have graduated and moved on into their professional lives. And so the story that I love to share It deals with my time right out of graduation when in January I became the teacher number 5 for these wonderful little eager students to learn at Washington Shores Elementary School in Orlando, Florida. And so, as I said, I was, I think, like the 5th teacher they had in January. And I came in and had a real tough time. And students, this is something that I share with all my classes, is that from that time, from January to May, a grown man myself, I would go home and cry almost daily, because those kids wore me out. And between my preparation or lack thereof of preparing to work with such a high needs population, and the lack of stability that my students had, it was a tough time. But I made it through, and every day I went back and I continued to teach. But then I began to question whether that was where I wanted to go. So I left the classroom after one semester and decided I wanted to go in a different direction. I went to graduate school, changed some ideals, and went back to that same school and taught. So essentially, I had a time where, I questioned whether teaching was for me. And it was based on the struggles that I had. And so and then I'll go back to my recommendations for you as future first-year teachers. Don't give up on yourself or those students within those first 3 years. My recommendation, that's statistics say, those first 3 years, give it 3 years and you'll probably stick. And so at any rate, I continued on through education and then moved into administration several years after returning to Orange County, moved up into the dean's position, and then finally moved to South Carolina, and within a course of 6 months, or 9 months, went from assistant principal to principal of my own school, Sanders Clyde K-12 school in Charleston, South Carolina. The picture you see of me in the kind of centered here is a picture that I actually ran in the newspaper, because in my first year as the principal, we were opening a brand new state-of-the-art building, a $25.7 million construction project that you see to your right-hand side. We were implementing a brand new curriculum based on arts and fusion. There was a testing scandal that had happened that preceded me, and that had caused our test scores to drastically plummet over the course of a year. And on top of that, we were receiving about 150 new students. Was there a question? Okay, just keep, so we were going through quite a bit of turmoil. And so after about 2 years of working, 2.5 years specifically working in that position, I decided that it was time to give that task to someone else. And the principalship was probably not the thing for me. There are people who, spend their careers in it. But for me, I made that decision early on that was some work for someone else. And so from there, I transitioned into higher education. And the very interesting thing about going into higher education within the same area that you did your K-12 education was that I ended up catching up with 2 of my middle school students from Orlando who had made it to FAMU as college students. And so these are 2 of the young ladies who were part of the Camp of Venture program that was a part of FAMU from the time I was a student back in the 90s until this year. And so that's one of the joys of education. And when you kind of move about a bit, you might catch up with some of those students. And so making that transition from K-12 to higher education, and actually that happened at FAMU as the director of the talent search program on FAMU's campus, I was able to then catch up with some of my students who are now in college. And now both of these young ladies are college graduates and have moved on in their lives. And so, I share that in the sense that I consider my journey not to be typical in terms of moving from one place to the next. There were times where I straddled K-12. There were times that I was completely out of K-12. there were times that I've been completely in higher ed. And even now in my current position where I'm full-time as in higher education as the campus manager at Valencia College for Evening and Weekend program, I still teach in our Education Preparation Institute, which is the alternative certification. So I'm working with teachers in K-12, preparing them for certification. So it's kind of that idea that I've been straddling K-12 and higher education from the time from very much the time that I started until now, and it's been a beneficial journey for me, as in, some people may stay in one district, stay in one school for the bulk of their career. I have moved around quite a bit. And for me, it has been a benefit to do that. And so, again, that's kind of the background, my story, or my why, how I'm here, how I got to where I am right now. And everybody also, you can, at any time, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourselves and share or ask any questions. But again, that's just kind of a little bit about my background. And so from this time frame, from college up until now, I've had some amazing opportunities that have come based on my experiences. And of course, that foundation that foundation is from my time as a classroom teacher. And so from there, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the data, and some of these may be things that you've talked about in your classes, students, but I wanted to talk about education and your importance of specifically students of color, and particularly African Americans, and where we stand right now. And so when we're looking at the population, when we speak specifically about African Americans, because we are at an HBCU, we're talking about between males and females, African Americans, we're only talking about 7% of the population in 2015, 2016 are African Americans. And for any males, and I don't know if we have any African American males on the call right now, but that number is somewhere around 2%. 2% of the teachers in classrooms in K-12 are African American males. And so, of course, you are needed, we are needed. And so that is a statistic that we continue to be aware of and hope to see improvement in the future. And so also in dealing with populations, we're looking at, in this slide, it talks about where our minority teachers, in this case, we're talking about minorities in general, not just African Americans, but where these teachers are actually teaching. And if we go to the top, obviously, where there's 10% or less minorities in schools, 98% of the teachers are Caucasian, essentially. And so we're talking about only about 2% of them are minorities. And so as we trickle down, it's not until we get to the place where the schools are majority, almost 100% minorities, where you're seeing minority teachers as the population, the major population. And so just some more statistics in terms of race, and this is just a indication of the race of our current student population for the 2003 period, 2015 period, and then 2017 period, 2027 period, which is obviously a projection. And as we look, we see that the number of white or Caucasian students is continually dwindling, as we see the Hispanic population with a major increase, and our African American and Black population specifically kind of stabilized and a few points down from percentage points down from 2003. And so as we're looking, we're seeing that our population for students is becoming less. The minority is becoming the majority. So there are more students of color who are projected to be in the schools in 2027, as opposed to students who are considered white or Caucasian. So these are there's implications in terms of what it means for you as teachers moving into the field after graduation. Although 2027 is 7 years away, many of you will likely be well into your careers and maybe even moving into administration by then, or have been, depending on your aspirations. And so finally, one of the statistics that I tend to want to share when we talk with educators is the discipline, in terms of how, if you look at the rates of discipline amongst the races and genders, African American males are surpassing all of the other demographics, and in some cases doubling and tripling their classroom cohorts in terms of the number of students who are experiencing out of school suspension. So this has implications in terms of you as teachers being able to go into schools and work with all students and do whatever you can to improve that and improve these statistics by culturally responsive teaching, by ensuring that we have fair practices within the classroom, and that's, we talked about classroom management previously, the importance of a system that is fair and equal to all students, and that is not punitive, and that works to teach our students how to navigate in the classroom, of things that become to potentially help these numbers, where again we're seeing African American males in some cases tripling the number of suspensions versus other demographics. And so there's some more discussion here, and I'll kind of skip through some of these other slides in terms of institutions. And we talked about K-12, but this is also important in terms of higher education, because I know as a student at FAMU, I was enamored by my professors who just seemed to have it all together and such amazing people. And so I wanted to be like them. My dream was to be the dean of the College of Education like Dr. Gadsden, and go on to be president like Dr. Humphreys. Those were dreams of mine. And so some of you may find yourselves in higher education working as professors. And again, our numbers are very small as well, where African American males and females, we are somewhere between, depending on the ranking, the academic rank, from lecturer, which is someone who generally just is the lowest ranking in terms of professor, to a full professorship, where we're talking anywhere from 3 to 5%. Not even 5, between 2 and 3% are African American males and females when it comes to being teachers in colleges. And so these are just numbers that I'm reminded of in my time in higher education. And so, for you as students, it is something to consider whether or not the higher education route is the way you want to go. And so the bottom line is, we need you in the profession. Whether you decide to maintain your tenure as a classroom teacher, or become a guidance counselor, academic coach, you move on to higher education and moving into administration as an assistant principal, district administrators, all those are kind of the typical roles that come as you navigate your time as an administrator within the K-12 system. But the bottom line is, regardless of where you land, we need you in the profession. So want to continue to focus on that. And so I did a quick search on Indeed and just typed in education across the United States. And I don't know if you can see it, but the number of hits that have something to do with education, that's something that's from as specific as a kindergarten teacher to a corporate trainer, or a manager of some sort that does some type of training. There were 1,421,195 hits when it came to putting in the descriptor for education. And so that just shows you that, although, some of those may be your typical K-12 education type jobs, the landscape in terms of what educators do and are asked to do has grown astronomically. And so the first question is, so where are some of those jobs? And so this is the bulk of what I will discuss now. We'll talk about some of the areas. This is not an exhaustive list in terms of there will always be other options, as particularly now as we see the education landscape changing with online learning becoming more of an issue or more of a necessity at this point. But I do want to put some discussion on some of the more typical areas where we see educators working outside of the typical classroom and typical school structure. I also want to say that, as I indicated earlier, although you may decide to teach, many of these positions are things that can be done during the summertime or after school, and so they become ways of supplementing your income and gaining additional experience. So it's not always about instead of teaching, it's in addition to a teaching scenario. And so I'll start with the place where I landed after my K-12 experiences with the federal TRIO programs. And TRIO programs are programs that have been established through the federal government, and specifically these programs are designed to increase the odds of quote-unquote low-income first-generation students, or they might say disadvantaged students. Sometimes the jargon is a little different, but students who are coming from low-income homes who are not products of families who have been to college. And so the federal government created these programs specifically identified to help this opportunity to use the skills that you have learned as a college student in order to help our students, and not just in the form of teachers and tutors, but also as program directors, program coordinators, and any number of capacities. The idea is that, and for most things in education, it takes some time. And so that means that when institutions are hiring for these positions, they're looking for individuals who have established records in terms of working with students in these high needs populations, who have had experience in increasing student achievement. So although you might not necessarily jump into a position like this right out of college, as you work through your time in the classroom and show your ability to help students achieve, you'll find yourself in a position where you're able to take advantage of some of the opportunities, because institutions across the country have a TRIO program. Some of them have 1 or 2, some of them may have 4 or 5 or 6 programs. And so they're always looking for educators to be a part of the TRIO process. And TRIO is just the umbrella name for all of the programs. And so, just in general, there's some description. I'm not going to read this to you at all. I basically kind of explained that stuff to you already. But again, the TRIO programs are purposed to provide support to low-income first-generation students in middle and high school, and then those moving on to college as well. One of the other programs, which was actually my first foray into higher education, was a balance, which was working with the Gear Up program, which is gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs. And Gear Up, much like the federal TRIO programs, are grant programs. These are state programs, so they are managed by the departments of education in various states. And again, it's the same concept of working with this high need population to increase student success for our students who may struggle in terms of getting out of high school and moving on to college. And so again, in the same vein, the Gear Up programs will be looking for program directors, program coordinators, tutors, summer program teachers. These are programs that are consistently looking for support because oftentimes their full-time staff are very limited, and so they bring on part-time teachers in the summer or after school. And so again, this is another avenue for an educator. So you're still working directly with students, but you're not dealing with some of the more challenging things. I know for me, the lesson plans were an issue for me. I couldn't stand turning in those lesson plans. And back when I was in college, it was Dr. Shakira, I'm sure you probably remember the Madeline Hunter lesson plan was, this, and I know it's still in use, but it was, the idea that you had so many pieces that you had to incorporate. And so, making sure you had those lesson plans intact for your teaching, of course, is important. But, many of us struggle with keeping track of those lesson plans. And so that was just an example, one of the things that was a challenge for me. But again, the idea is this is just another example. Again, very similar to Gear Up and Trio as Take Stock in Children, where it's more of a mentoring type program. Tallahassee Community College had, I believe that their grant just ran out as a matter of, no, I take that back. Tallahassee Community College has a Take Stock in Children's program. And so again, it's the focus on those low-income first-generation students and moving them out of the cycle of poverty. And so the same type of idea with Take Stock in Children, where these programs are looking for, are looking for coordinators and managers and directors and counselors who have that experience working with classrooms, working with the population who they serve. And so they're always looking for teachers educators who can help in various capacities. And so that's more the grant type federal and state programs. And then one of the things that I've become very interested in myself is, I obviously watch a little bit more TV than I normally watch. And so Animal Planet is a love of mine. And so they have a program called The Zoo, and they cover the Bronx Zoo in terms of the staff and the animals, and so it's just this whole kind of reality type show without the drama. It's just animals, but it's a great view into the zoos and animals and whatnot. And I bring this up because one of the things, as I did a recent job search myself, is that there are zoos and aquariums and amusement parks that are looking for educators to run their programs. Again, program managers, content developers. You think about all the times that you've gone to the Georgia Aquarium or to Disney or Universal for a field trip, and typically there's some type of educator liaison who has worked with teachers to develop a program so the students aren't just going to the park, but there's learning that takes place. And so they're looking for educators who can serve in those capacities to develop content and to host students for, at the Georgia Aquarium, they might do evening. The Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, they'll do evening programs for students or even like slumber parties at the aquarium. But all of these programs have individuals who serve as education coordinators who are typically have backgrounds in education. And I just provided a couple of the hits in terms of at Disney World. As you see the cell animation and creating a leadership legacy, Disney has a whole youth and educational program where they have individuals who are, again, creating contact, hosting students, developing lesson plans, because oftentimes what will happen is that if a teacher is planning a trip to one of the parks, the education department will send them lessons that they can work on prior to and after. And so just another aspect in terms of something that people may not think about in terms of careers But for the individual who loves to be outside and loves to be in the dirt working with animals, and may have started off as a zoology major and moved into biology education, this is a way of marrying some of that content with what you're learning in education. And so just another thought in terms of an avenue that, again, maybe a supplemental thing where you're doing it in the summertime or in the evenings or what have you, where you're still working as a full-time teacher as well. And then moving on, and of course, one of the areas where we have quite a few individuals who support educators might not be working with students in general is the U.S. and state departments of education. If you go to their websites, you can put in jobs, and you'll see that there are tons of positions where they're looking for educational specialists and policy analysts. And these, mind you, are positions that typically require a master's degree. And so they're looking for individuals who have additional education. And even in some cases, they're looking for individuals who have doctorates. And so again, it's that combination of maybe you spent 3 or 4 or 5 years in the classroom and you gain this experience. You may have been going to graduate school for something else, and then you're able to marry all of that into a career that, again, takes you out of the formal classroom into an environment where you may be supporting teachers, you may be working on program evaluation, where you're looking at how teachers are working in special education, or how they're if we're making sure of equity in terms of gender in classrooms, or unfortunately, there are investigators who travel from school to school researching issues that where an educator may have done something inappropriate, and so there's an investigation that's launched. And so all of that's a part of the Department of Education. And then, of course, we talked about TRIO and Gear Up. On the Department of Education side, you still have to have individuals who are managing the funding of those programs, who are making sure that the institutions are doing what they said that they would do with the money that they're receiving from the grants. A typical TRIO grant at Florida A&M University may be about $400,000 a year. And so if you have 3 or 4 or 5 of those grants, you're talking anywhere from, $1.5 to $2 million that the Department of Education is providing to the institution for these grants. And so you have to have oversight at the Department of Education. So you have this host of individuals who are ensuring that the money is being spent appropriately, that the institutions are meeting their goals, and their part of their responsibility is to evaluate the programs. And so that becomes another aspect in terms of experience that you can gain outside of the classroom. But again, I emphasize that so much of the expectation is that you've had some experience within a classroom setting before that you typically move into some of these positions. So they are looking for you to have that teaching experience before you typically get into some of the higher level and, of course, higher paying positions. And then another area that we don't talk about much is recreation and enrichment. And so 2 of the pictures I have here are from my time as a college student with the Camp Adventure program at FAMU. And so during my time as a counselor with the Camp Adventure program, I worked at summer camps in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Germany, 2 years in Japan, and the picture up top is not at Disney World here in Orlando, that's Tokyo Disney. And so and then the picture below is a picture of us coming or going back from a field trip at a camp in Germany where I was the camp director. And so those programs come through MWR and military in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and what have you. And MWR stands for Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. And so there are specific programs that the government sponsors so that military individuals and their families have programs, and goes back to those morale, welfare, and recreation that help them to adjust to being outside of the United States. And so the MWR, across the board, there are summer camps, there are libraries that they staff, their educational programs, their recreation programs, depending on the location of the military base. But again, they're looking for teachers who have, educators who have experience working with children. And one of the main ways that we get that is in the classroom. And so, some of the other places that you can find yourself working is in, county and city programs, of course, summer camps, whether it's at the city and county. Some individuals who go the health and physical education route, end up being personal trainers and coaches. The Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA, Big Brothers and Big Sisters are always looking for individuals with those credentials. And again, a lot of these positions are jobs that you can work in supplement to a teaching position. And oftentimes what happens is if you work there long enough and you are excellent in what you do, when full-time positions come available, they start looking at you as individuals who they work with and typically might offer you positions full-time. And then comes some of the private sector stuff that we see. If you go back to that LinkedIn search, is corporate trainers. Again, this idea of educators having the pedagogy, knowing how to teach and to train individuals, and so that then extends itself to private organizations and corporations. Community outreach, where you already have that experience working with parents, working with your fellow teachers, working with students, working with other stakeholders. Some of them are basic things. Tutoring centers, of course, your Sylvans and the like. That's something, of course, you can do on your own. One of the things that I see quite a bit of in my experiences is that a lot of our educators who have experience become consultants. And so the idea is that they begin to work with institutions and work with schools to help their teachers to become better. And some people make their money just straight up by being private tutors, charging 25, 30, 40 bucks an hour, depending on your specialty. And so, one of the things also, the last two are things that, more in terms of corporate positions, where you have educational programs, whether it's computer programs, whether it's intervention programs that are used to supplement learning in the classroom. And so you have those representatives that come to the schools and try to sell their products. And not only do they sell the products, but they also sell the training that comes along with those products. And so they are always looking for, again, educators who can connect their products to the needs of the schools. And then one of the other areas is the idea of the author. And you have companies like Scholastic that develop content that may be for intervention programs, or that may be just guided reading programs, but somebody has to write those books and create the lesson plans attached to them. And so that just becomes another way that you can, again, supplement or potentially make that into a new career for yourself. And so that's just another idea in terms of the private sector. And finally, one of the areas that we overlook as well is the idea of the civic and social organizations. Not only are you having the opportunity to gain volunteer time through these organizations if you are a member, you also, in some cases, have education foundations, where those individuals who are the foundation chairpersons or directors of education are salaried positions. And I know that there are several instances where Alpha Kappa Alpha in particular has a TRIO talent search grant. And so they wrote a grant to request funds from the government. And so now they have, or at least had a talent search grant through the TRIO programs. And so they're able to provide those services. And so there are those opportunities within the organizations, whether in many cases it may just be volunteer, but in some instances, there are supplemental paid positions that come when you provide the services as an educator that many people are not able to do. And so that's the last part of it. So I just have a few final thoughts in terms of final thoughts and recommendations. And this comes in the vein in terms of some thoughts that, I would have loved to have heard myself, that someone would have shared with me. And so if I were talking to my 22-year-old self who graduated back in '97, these are some of the things that, some advice that I would like to share with you students as you move out into the world of education. So the first thing is get that master's degree, get that specialist, get that doctorate. Particularly if you're going to stay in education, if you're looking to move up in terms of professionally, in terms of promotion-wise, you're going to have an advanced degree. And so if you have the ability to stay the course, get your bachelor's degree, and then move into a master's degree program, I highly encourage you to do all of that at one time. It's a great experience to go out and teach, fresh out of college, which is exactly what I did. But it does make it harder when you're trying to balance a full-time job and taking classes as well. And so that moves as well into the specialist degree, which is the step above the master's degree, and then, of course, the doctorate. So, my philosophy and my thought process is as much of your education as you can get done on the front end, do it, because it becomes tougher and tougher as life begins to happen. You get married, you have children, you get homes and bills and everything else, and so it becomes harder. So whichever route you do, if you're going to stay in education, you're going to need an advanced degree. So please consider staying at FAMU or going across the tracks to FSU and getting your advanced degree. The next thing is consider some diversification. And what I mean by that is this idea that you're coming out of FAMU with maybe a elementary ed degree or English education. Whether you can add a discipline to that as an elementary teacher, it's great if you have a certification maybe in middle school English or middle school math. It just gives you a little bit more diversity in terms of hiring, in terms of when the pendulum swings and maybe we don't need as many teachers. If you have multiple certifications in various contents, you're just more marketable. If you have a degree in, again, elementary education, but you've also worked on secondary biology or English, that just provides more in terms of what you're going to be able to do. And this is one I totally believe in. It's this idea of go for the job you think you cannot get, because you never know based on your experiences. And that's been my experience as a professional, is that people will go back through your resume and they'll look at the various, or specifically look at my resume, and they'll see the diverse types of jobs that I've had. And even going back to when I was in college, they're asking about you really spent summers overseas and you worked you spent summers abroad. That's amazing. Those are things that become marketable skills that may set you apart from the others in the application process. So whenever you can, apply for the job that you desire. Even if you don't get it, if you get to that interview table, you now have an understanding of the questions that they will ask and what they're looking for in the person that they hire. Finally, give it 3 years in one school. This is one thing that I did not do at the beginning of my career, where if I didn't feel comfortable, I moved somewhere else. And so I found myself towards the end settling more. But the idea is that you want to get a flow. You want to see what a whole year brings after being in the school for years. So that idea that you want to give it 2 years. However, the caveat to that is if you absolutely hate it, and this is not what you want to do, And then, of course, we don't want you to stay in a career that you hate, particularly when we're talking about education. So it may be hard, it may be rough, but if it's something that you see value in, I definitely encourage you to give it 3 years. And another idea is that you never know what's going to happen in life. You may get married and your spouse gets a wonderful job in another state. So go ahead and apply for certification once you get your professional. For example, if you're staying in Florida, states like Georgia and South Carolina have reciprocity. So it's just a matter of completing the application and then you become certified in those states. And so you do not have to go through the rigmarole of trying to certify if you have to move unexpectedly. And of course, going back to this idea of staying, the education in general is not for those who just want the summers and holidays. Make sure you're in it because it's something that you enjoy doing, you see value in. And then finally, understand that, this is not like a singer that may be discovered on YouTube. There are not many overnight successes or any overnight successes in education. It takes proving yourself, proving that you can manage a classroom, proving that you can move students academically from one level to the next. And that takes time. And so many of the positions that I talked about, although they are out there, they're looking for not just educators, but they're looking for educators who have had success doing the things that they need. And so that is the final point in terms of my thoughts and suggestions. And so the next slide is really just my contact information. And so if there are any questions at this point, I'd love to hear from some of the students, particularly who took the time, and I do appreciate that you all took the time out of what probably are very busy schedules right now to listen to what your fellow Rattler has to say. And so with that, ladies and gents, if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. Questions, comments, anything at this point. Okay. Is that a hand, Allison? Okay, I see. Okay, go ahead.
That's a hand. That's like me giving you a hand clap because I thought this was outstanding.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I have a question to kick the group off. How would you say, this was phenomenal, first of all. This has been what our faculty and staff has been wanting to share with the College of Education students for forever, that education is so much further beyond the classroom. And one of the questions I have is, a lot of our students say, why should I go through with an education degree when I can just transfer to interdisciplinary studies outside of the College of Education? Can you talk to them about, the importance of, if they were to stick with education, how that varies their field opportunities?
Sure. And I can give you a prime example, because as I shared with you, and I am still figuring out the whole Zoom thing. I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing, and just click stop sharing. That's what I do. That's what you do.
Yeah, there you go. I was just gonna say stop sharing.
You click on stop sharing. But prime example is, as I share with you, I teach in the Educator Preparation Institute, which is the alternative certification process. Because what's going to happen is, if you don't come out of college with that certification, with that education degree, you're going to have to take courses that are not at all, I'm just going to be honest with you, are not equivalent to the degree that you're going to that you receive as an educator. So there are the hoops that you are going to have to try to jump through to get to the point of getting that certification. Meanwhile, you may have that temporary certificate, but if you get off course with those classes, or you struggle with the certification, those are things that will in your education career, particularly in public school. There are, some private schools that, don't have to follow those same requirements that the state does. But if you are going into teaching, I highly encourage you to get it done while you're in college, because also principals are looking for the least trouble the least trouble in terms of the effort that it's going to take to get their teachers to maintain. Because what happens is a teacher looks at, the student that comes out of the College of Education degree, certification, ready to go. There's less that they're going to have to do in terms of working with that teacher to get them to the professional certification. So, those are some of the things that come into my mind in terms of why it's so much better to get the education degree. And also, when we look at interdisciplinary studies, another challenge that you're going to come into is that when you're looking at potentially getting into a master's degree program, you may have to have some additional prerequisites that an education major wouldn't have to have. So my students here, I see Jazz, Jada, Krista, Tamisha, Janelle, Antonique, Jelani. Stay the course. Get your education degree. It opens doors.
I also have a question. My name is Jasmine.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you again for the webinar. But I have a question about us, like when we graduate. I know you said, well, I do want to get my master's, but how am I going to be able to, pay for school? Because I would like to, start teaching right after I graduate, but I do want to get my master's. So how am I able to balance those two if I...
That was going to be my question. That was
okay.
my question.
Perfect question. And so this is where you have to be resourceful. All right. One of the amazing things that FAMU had going for it was the graduate feeder program. Dr. Watson, is that still in place? Okay.
Yes.
So graduate feeder program says that, okay, you're not going to stay at FAMU for your master's. You may go to Florida State or like I did with the graduate feeder program. I went to the University of Northern Iowa and had a free ride, because institutions still in this day and age are looking to diversify their populations. And so your Florida States, your University of Floridas, any of those institutions may be looking to increase their minority population, so they're going to provide special scholarships for you. Also, you have a McNair program that is a TRIO program that specializes in helping students, McKnight Achievers. These are programs that pay and give stipends for students to come to their institutions. And so if you are, Jazz, when do you graduate?
Spring of next year.
Okay, so this is a perfect time for you to start searching for these programs. And I'm sure there are probably people within the College of Education that can help with that process. But there are so many resources out there that help. And one of the things that you'll find yourself in a position to do is when you apply for financial aid, you may get yourself a graduate assistantship where you're working with a professor, or you may be even teaching a freshman level course as a graduate student. So there are so many avenues for financing that, I would be ashamed to tell you what my Sallie Mae student loan balance is right now, because some of the things that I've been told, that I'm able to tell individuals now, I didn't know. I was a first generation student. It was like, okay, student loans, I'll deal with it when I get older. And so
Mr. Middleton, I think we were in the same boat.
Yeah.
Were, as in maybe were for you, are for me.
Oh, I still have a balance. I was really hoping with the stimulus that they would say, we're going to waive all student loans from now on. Absolutely.
Well, I'll take that 6 months. I think that's 6 months that they waive the payments. But But the thing that I say is that make sure you tap into the people within your institution who have that knowledge. Say, okay, I don't want to pay any loans. I don't want to have loans when I go to grad school. What do I need to do? That may mean that you go to the University of Northern Iowa, where there were 2% Black people, or 2% minorities total, including international students when I was there. Or you go somewhere, like I said, right across the tracks of Florida State. But the idea is tap into somebody who can help you navigate that process. And I know there are people who are at the college that can help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things today is Dr. Jackson is having a fireside chat. He is the Associate Provost for Graduate Studies. So that is today at 6 o'clock. If you're interested in that, Jasmine and Jada, just everyone, I can email you that as well, so I could Q&A. But normally when we do have the Graduate Studies Fair every year, they are open, and we do invite our students to come. The College of Education does have a table there. Last year, Dr. Ellis, who's the associate, Reginald Ellis, not Rufus Ellis, who is the Assistant Dean of Graduate Studies, they had about 1,000, I think it was, students to come through. So we definitely, if you are not a member of the Graduate Feeder Program, as Mr. Middleton was saying, you want to do that. And I can, after this call, make sure to send you all the link, because all you do is register, it's free, and then you get seminars, webinars, and lots of training. And also in the College of Education, shameless plug, we do have the Master's in Curriculum and Instruction that you all should definitely consider as a viable option for graduate school.
And if I could just piggyback on Dr. Shakir, I was going to say the same thing. Going back to what Mr. Middleton said, the opportunities are out there. So just this academic year, we have tripled the number of graduate assistantships that we've had in the college in the last 7 years. What happens is, if you decide after you graduate you want to continue on with your master's, we can have you apply for the graduate assistantship, and it pays up to about $22,000 of your tuition and gives you a stipend while you work on research with a designated faculty member. So for instance, the C&I program that Dr. Shakir mentioned has several tracks. One is Minority and Urban Affairs, one is Instructional Design, and then another is Elementary Education. Am I missing a track, Dr. Shakir? No, so you have endless opportunities, and your degree will say Masters of Education in Curriculum and Instruction, which means you can point right back to the things that Mr. Middleton shared today and say, not only do I have a practical teaching degree in elementary or secondary subjects, but I also have a curriculum degree where I know how to write programs. So one of our graduates from 2 years ago taught at DRS while she was in the C&I program. She wrote a program, a curriculum in the C&I program on music and how to teach genres of music. Wynton Marsalis Foundation wanted to purchase her curriculum, so she and her husband relocated to New Orleans, Louisiana, and she took on a job with her C&I degree and her musical background and implemented that. She's implementing it full-time there.
Yeah, and pairing with the master's degree in C&I, for what Mr. Middleton was saying about like working at aquariums or some of these institutions that we may not traditionally think of as spaces for education, they're going to be looking, particularly in a post-COVID-19 world, for more people who have the education background to be able to design curriculums that can particularly live and function online. So that's a really good reason why you should definitely stay. And you have to think about this as paying now for your future. So if you're going to graduate school as a person of African descent, you are going to get paid to go to graduate school. you should not be paying to go to graduate school. You should go to the graduate feeder program, because I'm letting you know they have lots and lots of money to really be able to help you to afford it, Jasmine. So don't worry about the cost. I did not pay for any of my degrees, undergrad through graduate school, not one. So that's just so you know. That doesn't mean I don't have student loan debt, because I went to graduate school in Miami, so I had to live. But do not pay for graduate school. There are so many opportunities there.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Well, again, I thank you for the opportunity to share. The College of Education has my heart. It is my dream to come back there at some point again and work, but it's definitely an opportunity that I wish I had to gain knowledge from people who have navigated the paths that that I was trying to travel. And so again, Dr. Shakur, Dr. Watson, Ms. Andrika, I appreciate the emails and whatnot, and students, you all, as I shared the information about my contact information is there. That's another part, is networking. So now you know my face, and you know you come to or move to Orlando at the University of Central Florida, part of the graduate feeder program, and you need a part-time job. Say, hey, Mr. Middleton, I should be Dr. Middleton by then. But say, hey, Dr. Middleton, you know, you got some part-time work I might be able to help you with. Remember when you talked to me, and I really appreciated your time. So make note of my contact information.
I'm from Orlando, so I'll definitely be reaching out to you.
Oh, awesome. And so I'm happy. That's what it's about, helping the next group to come behind you. So I'm happy to help wherever I can.
I actually do have a quick question. So I remember you said when you first started teaching, you used to go home like really discouraged and emotional. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you more about that, because my plan was to graduate with my bachelor's and then do like a Title I school, so I can start getting, my undergrad loans paid off for. But like Jazz said, I also wanted to do my master's, because my parents are really big on me not taking a break. Like, there's no break. You got to just go all the way through.
Right. Okay. So there are a couple of pieces there. When we talk about Title I schools, you're talking about schools that are high needs, that require very precise classroom. It's all about classroom management. It wasn't that I didn't know the content. I didn't know what to teach. It was that you have to learn how to manage behavior. And this is before PBIS was a thing. This was, okay, you're Black, you're a man, you should be able to handle these kids. and that's the truth. And that's part of what my dissertation is on. We talk about Black male educational leadership, but it's the whole idea that there is an expectation based on how you look in terms of how you will manage your classroom. So you might be the one that gets the difficult student that's been in the class, in the school, or the parent, the difficult parent that has had a child in every grade level.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for what that means, but it also, you have to understand that you're not going to get it perfectly. You are going to cry. Unless you are almost soulless, you will cry. I was a rusty, grown boy, 22 years old, thought I knew what I was doing, and I would go home and cry behind those 7-year-olds. But you get better each day. You keep on showing up, and you get better each time, and you learn. You go watch the teacher that has it right. You go to whatever professional development that is offered, and you develop, and most importantly, you develop those relationships with those students. Now, those little knuckleheads that you saw in that picture are probably 30 now. So, and about 5 or 6 of them are my Facebook friends. So I've seen them from beginning to end. But, we talk about relationships and developing those relationships with the students. And I remember one of them, his name is Dakari Armstrong. We were out at recess, when we had recess consistently. And, he was playing, said, Mr. Middleton, you're like a dad to me. And, it's those things that they begin to want to perform for you
for you. Yeah.
You want to perform for them, they want to perform for you. You develop a community that you're not going to have the problems that some other people are going to have in their classrooms. And if you do, that's just a part of life. You get better. You know, you're going to have that class that rocks your world, and then maybe the next year you don't. That's why I said 3 times, 3 years. See what that flow is like after 3 years. And then talk to your professors. You know, email Dr. I'm sure, you know, your professor, Dr. Shakir, Dr. Watson, will be there to support you and find you a good mentor teacher. And I get long-winded, and I'm going to be quiet. But we talk about mentors. Your school is going to pair you with a mentor. That's just required by the state. But guess what? You're probably going to have to find somebody else that's going to be your other mentor, the one that's going to really be able to help you versus the one that's been through the professional educator, the clinical educator program so that they can supervise. So, you know, check out whose kids are walking down the aisle, down the hallway and not, you know, killing each other. Or when you walk by their classroom, they're working. It might be noisy in there, but they are still working. So just be very observant.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Thank you, Mr. Middleton, Jr. for your presentation. As I mentioned at the outset, Ms. Bryant will have this archived and recorded for us. Mr. Middleton Jr. has also said that he will send us his PowerPoint for those of you who may want to have access to it as well. Again, thank you, Dean Watson, for attending our strike series, and all the faculty members that we have with us and staff members as well. I know Ms. Shelton was on earlier with us. Dr. Newell is here now, Mr. Moise, and also Ms. Bryant. So for next week, Wednesday at 3, we will have Patricia Hunter, who is a graduate of Florida A&M University in the Counselor Education Program. She is going to discuss for us how we all adapt, right, as we're moving to this online setting, which for many of you may be uncharted territory. Also next week on Thursday at 3, we will have our student success coach, Jonathan Martin Gillum, who's also a graduate of the College of Education, who will give you some success strategies as we move into final exams. And then Franz Moise, also a student success coach, it's hard to say that quickly, will be with us on Friday at 3 p.m. where he's also going to talk about procrastination, and in particular how for many of you this may be a barrier, which we all know procrastination is not about time management, but rather an issue of self-regulation, right? So I will talk about that as well. And we will continue to keep you updated because we will do the strike series over the summer as well. And hopefully if we're back face-to-face in the fall, we'll be able to do this in person. But for now, we're Zooming away. So again, thank you all for participating. If there are no other questions, comments, or concerns, we will adjourn. Yes, Mr. Middleton.
Just want to say real quick, Jonathan Martin Gillum was actually one of my former TRIO students.
Oh, cool.
And he was a part of our Alpha Leadership Program as well. So awesome. He's definitely one of the good ones. So you all are lucky to have him.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for your time today. Also, remember, I put the link for the FAMU Graduate Feeder Program in the chat, so you can go on. I know all of you screenshot. I know you got the screenshot, so you can get that, or I can also email it to you as well if you would like that. Okay.
And I asked Dr. Jackson to give us the fireside chat information if they just want to listen in to what the graduate program is like. I asked that he send us the link, and I'll send it to you and Ms. Bryant, Dr. Shakir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dean Watson. Thank you all, and I hope you're staying safe, and we will see you next week for Strike Series again. Bye.
Dr. Shakir.
Yes? Is that Jelani? Hey, yes. Emily! Hey, that's one of our graduates, Emily, who first grade, right?
Second.
I'm third grade now.
Second grade in Duval.
Hi, Emily.
Third grade math now.
Awesome.
So thanks, Emily, for coming on. Maybe we'll get you for Strike Series. Yes and yes. All right. Bye.
All right.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Bye.